name is Danielle Buncio, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called VIATechnik. We're headquartered here in Chicago. We have offices around the country, and our focus is on bringing technology and innovation to the built environment, to real estate developers, to owners, construction companies, and design firms. I'll tell you a little bit more about my background because I think it's helpful just to kind of lay the groundwork in terms of the perspective that I'm coming from. So in addition to being the founder and CEO of VIATechnik, I'm also on the board of directors of a company called Reimagined, which is a national, about $2 billion, fully integrated real estate development, construction, and design firm. And really my passion is about bringing innovation to the construction industry and helping improve productivity. I'll touch a little bit on construction's productivity problem, but I'm guessing it's not news or surprising to any of you. VIATechnik was founded 6 years ago. We've implemented virtual design and construction and some sort of technology on over 350 projects this year to date, which we're really excited to see. Last year, the projects that we implemented technology on had a value of over $18 billion. It's across sectors, so we're getting like a really broad view of what's happening in the industry. We're seeing what's happening at not just a building level, but an urban level, a global level. I was asked today to focus on the future of our cities, and this is a really fun topic because cities are fascinating, right? Cities bring people together in a way that spurs economic growth. Have any of you guys heard of that long tail effect idea? Anybody? It's like why Amazon works, right? So everybody will go into Barnes & Noble and one person a week will buy a Harry Potter book. But there's maybe only one person in the US a month that wants to buy Home Gardening Tips 101, some very niche book, right, that was written by an author randomly in 1982. But that long tail effect, when we bring people together in cities, allows this spur of activity, right? I maybe want to go to a Malaysian restaurant once a year. If everybody else here does too, that means a Malaysian restaurant can be in Chicago and can be thriving. That doesn't work so well in Elgin. So cities are super fascinating with what they're able to do. And I think that the way we live within our cities and the way we interact with our cities is going to drastically change. And my estimate is sort of sooner rather than later. I think a lot of people think these changes are far off. I'm willing to bet that within the next 10 years, a lot of change starts to happen. What is going to change our cities? I think one of the biggest impactors will be autonomous vehicles. I was on a BizNow panel about a month ago, and I got super excited about autonomous vehicles. I think that wasn't even part of the topics we were going to discuss. The first person that came up to me after that panel was like, I think you're really bullish on autonomous vehicles. That's not going to happen. And I was like, you know what? It's not just me. It's actually a whole bunch of really smart people who are deploying their capital into autonomous vehicles, right? Here's a picture of a parking lot of Uber's autonomous vehicle fleet. The only way Uber could possibly be valued at $68 billion, that's what I looked at this morning, is if this autonomous vehicle bet works, right? And people at Apple and Google and all of the major motor companies are placing those same bets too. So what does autonomous vehicles mean for the people in this room, right? Nobody here is probably directly impacting, creating, working on autonomous vehicles, but being in the real estate and construction sector of the world, it's going to greatly affect the way that our cities look and the way that we have to build our cities, right? For one, parking assets are going to drastically change. I don't need to park my car if it drops me off and picks you up. There'll be dedicated AV lanes, which hopefully will be pretty awesome and will speed my way to work. Those are the obvious things, but I think that there's going to be this greater impact on the city, potentially expanding our definition of the city. Right now, there's a big move to re-urbanize. And I'm living in the city. I have 2 kids. We work in the city about a mile from where we live. And that's sort of the trend that's happening right now. But a lot of the reason that I live in the city is because it's super inconvenient to live in the suburbs and work in the city. But maybe it's not so inconvenient when there's autonomous vehicles. So could there almost be this reverse trend? It's really hard to know the impact, but I think that it's a question we need to start asking ourselves because being professionals in real estate and construction, we need to be prepared for it, and we need to shape what that looks like. So autonomous vehicles is something I'm pretty excited about. I've also started seeing these really weird things kind of popping around our cities. Does anybody know what this is? Has anybody seen one? Nobody? Yeah, it is. It's like a little security robot. I call it the rise of the intelligent systems. It is the night scope, and I got this picture from the Stanford Mall website. I was at the Stanford Mall probably 2-3 years ago now even, and I saw this thing, and everybody was like taking selfies with it, and I was like, wait a second, it's also like videotaping us. I'm like, maybe I don't want it to see my face. Then I started looking into what it's doing, and I started seeing actually technologies that's really implemented in places like China and the Middle East, where it's getting to know us. Imagine one of these in an office space or in a multifamily unit. It's getting to know us, and one day it realizes that I don't look right? And so it's starting to think, hey, this person comes to work every day, and today something's off. Is something about to happen? It's a little bit weird, the amount of data it's collecting and how it's going to use that data. The question we need to ask is, we're giving up our privacy here, right? I didn't tell Stanford Mall when I walked on that they could take my video of me shopping, right? But they did. So we're giving up our privacy, and I think it's only acceptable for us to give up our privacy and give up our data if we're getting something from it. And I do think that actually in a lot of ways we are getting something from it, not just at this greater city level, but just our regular everyday lives. Raise your hand if you have all three of these things, right? Your smartphone, Alexa or Google Home, you can raise your hand too, Nest or Smart Bee or something like that, right? The world that we live in, just our everyday regular life, is so smart. And it's actually really fascinating to watch the different generations interact with these tools. I sometimes have trouble with the Nest, I'll admit. But my 2 and 5-year-old have no problem navigating these systems. They're asking Alexa questions all day long. Alexa's constantly playing songs and constantly telling jokes in our house. But what's super fascinating is the way that all of this stuff gets integrated. Our life is so convenient, right? Alexa knows when I need toilet paper, when I need paper towels before I did, right? So imagine this world where she automatically sends it to me. That's affecting our everyday life. It's making it more convenient, but it's actually affecting the built world as well, right? Amazon's distribution centers, Amazon's warehouses will start to look different because of predictive ordering. But the technology that's affecting our everyday lives is starting to demand creeping into the workplace and creeping into the built environment. I can't go home and use all this cool technology and then go to work and build construction projects in the same old-fashioned way. That makes no sense, right? So because of the technology that we have in our everyday lives, we're demanding more from our buildings and from our cities. And I think that it's creating this built environment that's much more convenient, that's definitely connected, right? Everything speaks to everything else, and everything speaks to us. And it's truly digital. So what, the autonomous vehicles, the night scope, are sort of the future, but a lot of the stuff that's future is actually happening today. So I'll show a couple examples. One is definitely real world today example. Does anybody here work for WeWork? Told somebody else if somebody did, I was going to make them tell the story instead of me, just to make sure I did it right. But WeWork as a company that we work for is using technology in a lot of really fascinating ways, from design to construction to facilities management, and closing that feedback loop and bringing the data right back to design. They've started asking the question, what if buildings learned, right? What if they got smarter? What if they were more effective the more they were used, right? Through our WeWork app, through sensors, and through that sort of real life information of how people are using the space, they're creating spaces that are more flexible. These types of conference rooms are always overbooked. These are underutilized, right? People, where are they sitting in their desk? Where do they want to sit? What kind of spaces are they using? Feeding that real information back into the design to create smarter buildings. It's a super fascinating way to use the technology that's readily available to make the built environment better. I went to China about 6 or 7 months ago. VIATechnik's started a Smart Cities Alliance with a couple other pretty innovative groups, one of which is a pretty large like big data company in China. And some of their vision for what the future of buildings and what the future of cities looked like was incredible. So they started asking the question, right, not just what if we built the spaces smarter, but what if the buildings were so smart they could actually enhance the user experience? And so the way that they would do this, bear with me for this example, is by connecting different sources of data. We have the building information model, right? We have the data from the BIM of what the building actually is. We have data from IoT sensors, and we have, in China, they have data from your phone, from every single thing, right? One app is what's used basically as like Facebook, email, text, voice. You pay through it. Everything kind of happens through that WeChat app. So now as we're walking around the space, they know a lot of information about us. So they say, hey, you're at a hotel and you're a businesswoman and you do construction technology. I'm gonna make sure that you bump into this construction executive because you know what? That makes your experience here better. And it's sort of funny. It instantly made me think of, has anybody been to Alinea? So they'll kind of do that by hand. I don't know if everybody knows this. But they'll say, hey, you and you would really benefit from sitting next to each other. They'll like LinkedIn you before you sit there. You think it's random, but they've actually potentially paired you next to people you could benefit from talking from. This is sort of like a smart way to do that. So I think it's pretty interesting. And so kind of like in summary with that concept, right? We, because of all this technology, will be demanding cities that are connected, convenient, and digital. That's my hypothesis. So as design and construction professionals, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that owner requirements are becoming more demanding, right? We have owners that know what the possibilities are, and they're going to demand nothing less. We did some building information modeling for the Tesla Gigafactory, and Elon Musk, though I never met him and we were 5 levels down or more, has got to be the most demanding owner on earth. He will change his mind. That entire factory was going to get redesigned, but the construction completion date was never allowed to change. We could only keep up with those complexities because of the processes we were using in virtual design and construction to quickly iterate and get information to the field. There was no option of building things the old-fashioned way. He demanded nothing less. Similarly, building designs are becoming more complex. There's a lot of tools at our disposal. We can build some pretty awesome buildings. Here's another project where we were involved in the BIM for. It's the Apple Campus 2, or Apple Park, the new headquarters for Apple in Cupertino, California. There's a lot of complexities here. Whole building systems were invented just to meet Apple's demands. But even at a very basic level, this entire thing is round, which means there's almost no 90-degree angles. And surprisingly, most of our layout tools and most of how we do framing, most of how we build buildings is based on 90-degree angles, which led to some pretty interesting complexities from a quantity takeoff material order perspective all the way to actual construction execution. So this technology is making demanding owners. It's allowing us to have more complex designs. So how are we doing with that? Well, we're having some problems, at least in the construction industry. Who here is in the, who here would define themselves as part of the construction sector? Because I know we have real estate, I know we have construction, we have design. It's maybe like a third, maybe less. 70% of construction companies in a survey put out by AGC and Autodesk said that they're having a hard time finding qualified skilled labor. When I talk to people, I think that this is a low estimate. I think that almost across the board, every company feels that labor squeeze. And that's really hard when you look at some of the productivity problems that are happening, right? Low productivity, not enough labor, a lot of stuff to build, that does not equal, right? So some of you guys have probably seen this chart. It's from the McKinsey Institute. They put out a white paper, research report on construction's productivity puzzle. And what they're showing here is along the y-axis, they're showing cost of labor, right? So countries up here are high cost of labor countries. And then on the bottom, the x-axis, they're showing productivity gains over time, just measuring against that country. So China's becoming much more productive. They might have been starting at something way worse than us. But the United States is actually declining productivity and a high cost of labor, right? That is not good. We have a problem. This sometimes makes it clearer in another way, right? So this is showing construction productivity versus the manufacturing industry. We're 1.7x worse than the manufacturing industry in terms of productivity gain. Now, I'm not talking about like absolute value productivity. I'm talking about the improvement. And so the actual productivity difference is probably even greater. What does that mean at a city scale, right? Like at a company level, at a building level, at a project level, that's already really rough to deal with. But at a global level, we're talking about like a $3.9 trillion gap in GDP. We're talking if we close that, we could create 2.5 million jobs. That's a big deal and something that we really need to work on changing. There's a couple things that I think have actually been doing pretty well at addressing this issue. The first is building information modeling. It's that idea of data and 3D geometry coming together to understand how a building is built before it happens in real life. We put together a survey to ask, we got a lot of respondents to tell us what the impact of BIM was, right? Is BIM impacting your projects? Are you getting ROI from it? I'll be honest, I think most of the people who answered our survey did believe that BIM was valuable, so I do think that our results are slightly skewed. But what they saw was valuable, I think, was very interesting, and it showed that we have gone beyond just clash detection and clash resolution. We've gone beyond just making sure that things fit in the field, and we're actually using this as a way to improve construction planning and logistics, to reduce rework. It's used as a better communication tool on our projects, and so something like this is really moving the needle finally in terms of construction productivity. And BIM is an enabler, right? BIM in and of itself is not the end game at all, right? What does BIM enable? One great thing that I also see moving the needle in construction productivity is prefabrication, and you can't do that until you have a BIM. You need to know what you're going to build before you build it. Here's some images from our BIM of a hospital project that we did in St. Louis. And so what you'll start to see is bathroom pods, which is a very common example of prefabrication, right? You have this modular bathroom pod, it gets built in a factory, and ideally it fits in place on site. They actually took it one step further, and it wasn't just the bathroom pod, but it was the room itself and the adjacent corridor. So almost that entire building is getting sent there in chunks. And it's multi-trade, right? It's not just the wood or metal framing, it's also the MEP systems. So that's really pushing the needle here. One of our biggest clients is a company called Katera, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard from, and they just want to turn the construction industry on its head. They're also fully integrated from development to design to construction to the supply chain, and they've said, hey, semiconductor does this, automobiles do this, we can do this for construction. But it's difficult, right? If I went to Boeing and asked them to give me the part list of the Boeing 777, assuming I could get someone to answer me, they could actually tell me this, right? They do know exactly how much sealant is in here, exactly how many nuts and bolts are in here. Nobody could tell me. I just looked up one of the tallest buildings being built right now, and the Wanda Vista downtown was one of the tallest ones in Chicago being built. If I went to that construction job and said, hey, can you give me your parts list? They would think I was crazy. They're physically building this without actually knowing their part lists. That's weird. And they think I'm weird for asking that? We need to get better, right? We need to know what we're building. Like I said, our owners are demanding it. So the result that's happening, right, is that something's broken. I thought this was a really interesting chart. It was put out by the Dodge Construction Outlook 2018 report. They asked over 100 owners, tell us about your typical construction projects. Are they ahead of schedule or behind schedule? And also tell us about your best project. And so what I thought was really interesting is that 21% of owners said that their best project was still behind schedule. And 17% said that their best project was over budget. So that's the best we can do, right? That's kind of crazy, right? Like imagine walking into a car dealership. You're told the price, you're told you can drive it off the lot. You actually start paying for it, you give them your check, they take it from you, and then they say, actually, no. It's $10,000 more. You're like, what? I already started paying for it. Sorry, it's $10,000 more. Change order. And you can't drive it now, come back in 2 weeks. We would never accept that in any other industry, but that is exactly how real estate and construction is working. And I think a big reason why is that lack of digitization. I showed you so many examples of how this world is becoming truly digital, and we have it in our everyday lives. Why do we check that technology at the door when we go to work in construction and real estate? So construction is right down here. This is a chart actually also by McKinsey that shows the level of digitization across different business processes. Construction is second to the worst, above agriculture and hunting, right? But you know what? There's some really cool technology happening in agriculture and hunting. They're using IoT, they're using drones, they're doing data analytics like we've never seen. So I'm pretty sure when this gets redone, we're gonna be at the bottom. So that's bad. And I'd like to equate it to what I see happening in other industries, right? We need to wake up, because if we don't wake up, we're gonna get rolled over. And I think what's happening with Amazon is actually a really great example. And I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon's actually one of the players to do this for real estate and construction. I don't think they're stopping at retail necessarily. So I'd like to tell the story about when Amazon bought Whole Foods. The grocery industry always thought that they were sort of safe, right? It's fresh. How are you gonna deliver it? We're safe from Amazon, that's different. And so one day, Amazon bought Whole Foods. And prior to that, Costco, Walmart, Target, Super Value, Kroger, right? They were all competing against each other in the supermarket industry, in the grocery industry. They all were comparing each other in the same, the same market valuations. They were saying, okay, this guy does this for marketing, we're gonna one-up him here. This guy does this for supply chain, we're gonna one-up him here. And they were competing against themselves without realizing that there was somebody in the background that was going to be a disruptor. This is what happened the day Amazon bought Whole Foods. Amazon and Whole Foods stock prices increased like crazy. And Super Value was the worst one hit here, almost lost 20% of its value overnight. Overnight, they realized that they were no longer playing the same game that they were yesterday. They were playing a different game. And I feel like that's what's about to happen to us, because people are noticing. I started this company 6 years ago, and at the beginning, none of my friends that were in real estate, or that weren't in real estate or construction, had any idea what I did. And then these reports came out. McKinsey came out, I think it was February of 2017. The Economist wrote a really interesting article in August of 2017. And my friends in other industries started sending me these articles like, wait, is this what you do? They talked about BIM. They talked about IPD, right? And they're like, those are the words you've been telling us, right? Suddenly, other people started to notice. When other people notice, that's actually cool, right? That means there's an opportunity here. That means there's something we can improve. But that means that there's a chance that we might not be the ones to do it, which is scary, right? Because we want to be the ones to do it. All right, so what's happening right now that people are noticing? There is a huge influx of VC investment. In 2017, $433 million was invested into U.S. construction technology startups, and then $12.6 billion in real estate startups. Big ones, obviously, being like Katera, WeWork, and Airbnb. These are disruptors. People are looking to change the game. So we know that change is happening. The unfortunate thing is I can't stand up here and tell you exactly what's going to happen, because predicting the future is really hard. And here's a great example of someone who was actually changing the future that still couldn't predict it. Thomas Watson, president of IBM, in 1943 said that he thinks there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. And to some extent, he was right, because when the computer looked like this and it was an entire room and the government and universities were the only ones that had them, he was right. There was a world market for 5. But raise your hand if you personally have 5 computers. Your desktop, your laptop, your iPad, your phone, your watch, right? those are all computers. I have 5. And he thought the whole world was only going to have 5. Really bad prediction. This is a consulting company, actually the one my husband used to work for, that told a telecom company, don't worry, cell phones are a niche market. This Motorola thing, like, not a big deal. That's not true, right? We're really bad at predicting what's going to happen. We're really bad at predicting innovation. We're really bad at predicting disruption, but we know it's coming. So my hypothesis is that we just have to make sure that innovation is part of our DNA. We're thinking about it, we're ready for it. So at VIATechnik, our philosophy towards innovation is this 3-pronged approach. You can borrow it. It's people, process, and technology, right? It's not just about the technology itself, because that is cool and that's important, but actually all you need there is money, right? You need the hardware and the software, you buy it, you have the technology. To make it successful is the process and the people. What are our current processes that need to change? What are our current processes that we need to know about and we need to feed into? Who are the people? What are their skill sets, right? Who's on board and who's not on board, right? Who's detracting from this process of innovation? So defining, understanding, and working to change the people on the process side is sometimes the most important. So I think what we need to do is start chipping away at the problem, right? We need to dream really big. We need to understand where we want to go at a project level, at a city level, and at a global level. But we need to start making action now. So I'm going to walk through a couple really quick examples of some action that we're taking now. And I'm going to try to show like a design, kind of a construction and operations type example. My clicker doesn't like me. There we go. All right, so here is an example of us using virtual reality. This is the Chicago's old post office. We partnered with a design firm and created their space in virtual reality. I always like to learn from other industries, right? What is another industry doing that if I brought it to real estate and construction could be new and innovative? And so in this example, we're learning from the video game industry, from the entertainment industry, and we're visualizing projects in whole new ways. We're saying ahead of time, what is my space going to look like? And is this what I wanted it to look like? Before, a design vision was just trapped inside these 2D drawings or inside like a really intimidating 3D BIM, right? This isn't intimidating at all, and it's fun. And it shows a project, like what this project's going to look like. Great for marketing and leasing that property, and great for visualizing the design. If we take this one step further, we're trying to now use virtual reality. This is going to make you sick, so don't look at it too much. We've sped up somebody basically walking through an apartment, and what we've done is we've tracked where they're walking. So there's a heat map there. Right, and so green, you kind of see everywhere they've walked, and red means they've walked there a lot or they've stayed there for a while. And so what's really interesting about this is most of the time the way users interact with the space is only available once the space is already built, right? I watch people or I use sensors, right? Like what WeWork is doing. They're using actual data and then informing the design of future spaces. But here we're creating synthetic data. We're virtually simulating how somebody's going to be using a space, and then using that to inform better design. That's the way to make buildings smarter, right? I've optimized the design based on actual usage. Going back to my theme of learning from other industries, here's a construction example. Every industry simulates or practices before they do it in real life. Construction loves to try things for the first time. They use the excuse that every project is unique. I sometimes give the example, I built one of the phases of the Chicago Riverwalk, or we built it, and we poured underwater concrete in negative 10-degree weather while it was snowing. Most of us had never poured underwater concrete, and it was snowing and negative 10 degrees. Nobody had ever done that. That was really dangerous. Why didn't we simulate it? So now we're using simulations just like airplane pilots would, just like the military would, just like companies or organizations like NASA would. And what construction has in common with these type is that the risk is really high, right? And so it's much better to practice virtually so that game day you're ready to go. So here's an example of a project. Some of you guys might have seen this before. We did it a few years ago. at a nuclear power plant. And the problem that they posed to VIATechnik was that they needed to figure out how to install a new vessel into an existing and operational facility, and that every day the plant was shut down was $1 million a day. So they came to us to understand the best way to get that in. And actually, at first, they just asked us for a laser scan of the existing and to turn that into a 3D model. But once we understood their problem, right, how to get that vessel from A to B as quickly as possible, we realized that the scan to BIM was only going to scratch the surface at solving their problem. But it was the start of it. So here's some images from the laser scan. And that was important because it gave us a really accurate existing conditions environment. From that laser scan, we created a 3D model. And it's important to know that it was data rich, right? You click on a pipe, it tells you what type of pipe it is, right? You click on a column, it tells you what type of column it is. We put in as much information as we could figure out because that was really important to making the decisions. Can this be demoed? Can this be brought offline? Or does that have to stay and we need to avoid it? So then we used gaming technology, a program called Unity, to program a simulation of what they planned to do. They gave us these like little 2D logistics plans. And we showed everything it was gonna hit turned red, and we showed right there that it was gonna hit a structural column and the plant was gonna explode. So I said, hey, don't do that. Look, your plan didn't work. And so then we gave them the functionality to test and simulate virtually 100 times if they wanted a different, more optimal path so that they could find the best way. We determined that there's still some level of demolition that needed to happen. This thing was just too big. But let's be smart about what we're demoing so that we can also be fast, right? When they hit that structural column, we showed them that they were going to save, because of this technology, at least $1 million. Because remember I said that every day the plant is shut down is $1 million a day. So this was a really huge win. I always tell people that if I can show you a technology that's cool, I can probably get you to try it at least once, right? VR is cool, you should try it. But if I can show you a technology that's gonna save you $1 million, help you win a job, help you build something better, you're gonna become addicted. And that's what this industry needs. Moving on to a operations example, the foundation of smart cities, right, is really data. And the 3D models that we now create for our buildings are so data rich that we can really start to manage our facilities from there. You can't read any of this. It just is my attempt to show you a lot of data, right? We can click on a piece of equipment in a model and tell you what the make, model, manufacturer number, serial number, warranty information, photos from when it was installed, right? All that stuff that lives within that piece of equipment to help you better manage your facilities. So this is what's happening today, but what the future of this means is that we can do predictive maintenance, right? I can start to layer on top of this actual usage data and not just respond when something's broken, but predict when something's gonna break. The highest cost of any sort of maintenance is actually not the material itself, right? It's all about the labor. So if I can now go in and be methodical and change all these lights because I know that within 6 months they're all gonna go out, right? I've saved a lot of money. So that the way that we're using this technology to become more predictive, to become smarter, is huge value. And that data is really important, right? At a building level, right? Those 3D models, this technology is your building in data format. But that's building level data. When you think of city level data, that's a whole lot of stuff. And the unfortunate truth is that our industry, our cities, our governments aren't really set up very well to understand that data, to use that data, analyze it, and become smart from it. So we really need to focus on this data piece. I think that's going to be a big predictor of our success in the future, so that we can really get to a smart, connected city, one that is, like I said, convenient, connected, and digital. So to wrap up today, I'd like to ask you to dream big, right? To think about what that moonshot is, what that thing is that might sound kind of crazy today, but if achieved, would fundamentally change the way we do business, and just start chipping away at it, right? Each of those examples I showed is just chipping away at it and getting us one step closer to that moonshot.